most of the vampire characteristics that we're familiar with come from Eastern Europe, Slavic culture around the 17th century. And in many Slavic traditions, there was the vampire idea that was known as Nosferatu, and they were corpses that would return home after death. And they weren't beautiful and sexy like today, but they were bloated and oozing blood out of their eyes and their ears and their noses. And people were super serious about this. It was a very, very, very real concern. And some people corpses might be suspected of being a vampire if they opened the coffin and there was blood oozing out of the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And sometimes people would stake corpses before being buried just to make sure they didn't come back as a vampire. There was actually a vampire panic in the 1730s, the 1720s and the 1730s in Eastern Europe. In Serbia, there was a man who was blamed for several deaths after he died. Locals dug up his body and claimed that it looked fresh. It looked fresh, and it looked like it had just gorged on blood. And these accounts came into the official records, and the Habsburg monarchy even took note of it at some point. And then we fast forward a little bit later, and we have, in the 19th century, English literature started to write about vampires. The major book in 1819 was called The Vampire, and there was a physician who he wrote about a vampire who was very cold and wealthy and aristocratic and fancy, and that was a story that a lot of people really liked and got ideas about vampires from. And then, of course, in the late 19th century, Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, which I also do a little bit of ASMR and some videos reading his book. But there was a lot of Victorian anxieties at the time about vampires and Transylvania and the Eastern Europe, which is where a lot of these stories came from. And so Dracula kind of took those anxieties and those traditions and lore and shaped it into an idea of Dracula that we have today. And most vampire stories that came after that are influenced by Bram Stoker's Dracula. And there were lots of different communities and ways that people started to develop to try and protect themselves from vampires. And garlic was one of those things. Staking vampires in the heart was another one. The symbol of the cross, because of its holy divinity and purity, and holy water, of course, as well. I think silver got in there somewhere. Iron was even part of that at some point, just like silver. Isn't that interesting? But, of course, one way to get to a vampire's weakness is Elena. We all know that. And then there came ideas that a vampire can compel people to do things, but if they look like Damon, then that sounds about right. Or Klaus from the originals. Everybody loves Klaus. He's great. Also, as time went by, people started to romanticize vampires. They're like the super sexy undead. And there's an old black and white movie of Dracula called Dracula that's based on Bram Stoker's story. It's really cool if you like black and white movies, which I do. And then later, new versions of Bram Stoker's Dracula was made. And then we even have my favorite vampire movie with Leslie Nielsen called Dracula Dead, Undead. No, it's my favorite movie and I can't remember. It's Dracula Dead and Loving It. It has Leslie Nielsen and it's hilarious. It's a Mel Brooks movie. It's my favorite comedy movie, I'll say. My favorite funny vampire movie. But all in all, I think that there's something really appealing to the idea of not truly dying after death, and that's part of why we're drawn to vampires. vampires and vampire lore, because they're still human-like. They're not scary like mummies and zombies, and they're corporeal, so they have a body, so they're not like ghosts. And it's really appealing, the idea of one of those vampires befriending you or falling in love with you and protecting you and taking you on adventures and maybe eventually making you immortal. I think that's why we're drawn to them. There's something very alluring. And what do you think? Let me know what you think. What you think? Do you like vampires, or do you think ghosts are cooler than vampires? Sometimes ghosts are cooler too. Sometimes I like ghosts. Probably the scariest ghost story, the greatest ghost story. It's not really a ghost story, but one of the stories from when I was a kid is that 90s show, Are You Afraid of the Dark? And it was so scary. And there's this episode where this kid works for this guy in the mall, and he has all these antiques, and one of the antiques that he was fixing is a pinball machine. Do you guys remember pinball machines? I don't know if they still have them anymore, but there was a pinball machine, and it was covered up by this cloth, and the guy who owned the store told the kid, don't play with it, whatever you do, don't play with it. And one day the kid was watching the store for the old man who owned the store, and the man left, and of course the kid went back and he uncovered the pinball machine, and he played it because he loved pinball. And next thing you know, he's playing for hours and hours, and he finally leaves the store after playing the pinball machine for so long, and he goes into the store, into the mall, and nobody else is there. The whole place is shut down, and a witch comes after him, and like an evil king and a knight. And then the girl that he saw in the mall earlier, she's there, but she's like dressed as a princess, and it's totally crazy. There's all this crazy stuff, things and tokens he has to keep getting, and riddles he solves, and all these bad guys are like chasing him and coming after him, and he finally gets the princess on the throne and like gets rid of the evil king. And then the game starts over. He's in there. He realizes he's not actually in the mall. He's in the game. He's in the pinball machine. And he looks up at the glass. He looks up, and the old man who owns the store looks down at him through the glass ceiling, and basically tells him, like, you're stuck in there forever because you disobeyed me. And the poor kid is just like stuck in there forever. This kid is like 12 years old at the most. And I recently rewatched this episode, and it wasn't as scary, of course, as when I was a kid, but it still like haunted me throughout my whole life, and it was like a really scary thing to put it back on and try to watch it. But I was watching the whole all of the episodes. I was watching the whole series, so I had to watch it, but it was the last one I watched. I saved it for last because it was so scary. Do you guys have any Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes that haunt you, or any other childhood episodes of something or movies that haunt you, like the Leprechaun? Oh my god, I saw that when I was in 3rd grade. It scares me so much, that Leprechaun. Like, until like many years later, I still thought that, like, part of me thought, oh, he's gonna grab me from under the